BruCast is back, baby.
This BruCast episode is brought to you by the BruCast store. Explore a store filled with awesome goodies from hoodies to t-shirts to mugs. We've got you covered. Stay in style with BruCast. Embrace the shock, set the trend. Visit now bru-cast.com/store. Link below. Alright, welcome back to another BruCast episode. If it's your first time watching the show, make sure to like and subscribe. If it's your first time, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rank the show 5 stars. This will ensure that the podcast is recommended to even more people and allow me to keep doing what I love. BruCast is also on Instagram, X, and TikTok, where we upload shorts with the highlights of the show. So follow now, BruCast on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Links on the description below. Our guest today is Aliesha Embleton. How are you doing, Aliesha?
Hi, Bru. I'm great. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for being a part of BruCast. I'm really excited for this episode. So before anything, Aliesha, what do you think about maybe introducing yourself?
Sure. Thank you. So I am Aliesha. I am a child development coach. I work with primary school age children, so typically from around 6 or 7 years of age through till around 12 years of age, ballparked. Work with primary school children to help develop them around 3 fundamental pillars and 3 fundamental areas that we really need to support the growth and development of our children. Those 3 areas being resilience, authenticity, and entrepreneurial spirit. These are the 3 sort of fundamentals that are really going to help shape and help develop the skills that our children need to be able to set them up for a life of success. So that's sort of the areas that I look to focus in helping children and their parents develop.
All right. Interesting. So resilience, entrepreneurship, and what was the last one?
Authenticity.
Authenticity. All right. That's very, very interesting. So I understand resilience and authenticity, but why do you think entrepreneurship is very important for children to learn?
And it's a great question because entrepreneurial spirit could mean different things depending on how you look at it. The way that I define entrepreneurial spirit, if we think of things like the ability to view failure as an opportunity to learn rather than an obstacle in their way, looking at that innovative mindset, looking at the growth mindset of things, looking at how they can continue to grow and evolve and, view that journey of learning as a positive one, thinking around their ability to problem solve and come up with creative ideas. All of these are really fundamental skills that successful entrepreneurs have, but they're going to set up every single person for success in life, which is why I believe these are real key things that we need to bring through and develop in our children.
I see. All right. Yeah, makes sense. But I imagine, for example, if I approach a kid and say, hey, let's learn about entrepreneurship, they're going to say, no, leave me alone. So how to make it more palatable, so to say, for kids, more interesting for them?
Yeah. And look, it's the same with resilience and authenticity as it is for entrepreneurial spirit. These are abstract terms to children. They don't necessarily even understand any of the 3 of them. So the same way that we can look to create learnings that are just a natural part of development, that is how we'll be able to teach them these skills without it necessarily being defined as one thing or another. So there are lots of sort of practical ways that I develop these 3 areas with children. And through that journey, and obviously in my conversations with the parents through that journey, we are all talking these languages of resilience, authenticity, and entrepreneurial spirit. And during the journey, the child starts to understand what these particular areas are, what is the definition, what do they mean, why are they important. But initially, none of it makes sense to the child. And that's where that learning and that practical approach is really just so invaluable.
I see. Okay, so you're working with the parents alongside your work with the kids. So it's not only with the kid, the parents are always involved.
Correct, yeah.
All right. That's so interesting. So I wanted to ask you, like, what sparked your passion for childhood development coaching?
So this has been a life purpose for me. It's something that just drives me in what I want to be doing in the world. I've been working with adults in a learning and development space for many, many, many years. And I really saw the ability of being able to, instead of work reactively, be able to work proactively. And so that's where I've got this life vision in being able to now work proactively in helping to support children to develop these skills that they need in life. What I've noticed raising my own two stepsons is that there's a lot of support, and also with various different other friends' children, there's a lot of support that these kids get during the early childhood phase, sort of where they're up to about 6 or 7 years of age. Before they start school, there's a lot of support and development, and it's a different way of teaching and learning at that age. And at that point in time, children are very focused on just their little world, and their world at that point typically doesn't extend that far beyond the parents and the family unit. Whereas once they then start moving into this middle childhood phase, things start changing. Their world starts to expand. They start going to school. They get, a whole different sort of level of interactions with their friends. Their world starts to become bigger than just their family and that family unit. And so this is where they then start trying to navigate, well, how do they really show up in that way? And so then by the time they reach to the teenage years and the adolescent stage, if we haven't developed those fundamental skills, this is where we start seeing a lot of those challenges coming through with adolescents around anxiety, depression, and not being able to handle those, peer pressure, the societal expectations, navigating all of those challenges that they do face when they reach teenage years. And then those challenges obviously keep expanding and evolving. So that middle childhood phase is so critical in being able to develop these life skills, in learning them, being able to start practicing them, so that by the time they reach teenage years, these are skills that are embedded. They know how to do these things, and they then just start working on bigger and bigger scales of how they do these same coping strategies and the same tools that they have learned in different challenges.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, yeah, because as far as I understand, things that you experience as a kid will shape your personality for your entire life. So, for example, if you suffer like a trauma when you're like 3 or 4, if you don't work it out, or have a childhood development coach helping them, this will, as you mentioned, develop into anxiety and depression, and they don't even might understand where it comes from, right? So it kind of feels like a snowball effect, like the way, is that a good analogy?
A snowball effect of those challenging times, those challenging emotions, those challenges is a great analogy. That the bigger that snowball gets, the harder it is to control. And so this is where it's so important to be able to teach them that emotional regulation. That's part of that resilience and that authenticity and that entrepreneurial spirit work that I do. Underpinning some of those is emotional regulation. That's a key part there. And being able to understand all of these new and expanded emotions that they start to experience as well. Yes, it's very true that a lot of children before the age of 7, a lot of their patterns, their values, their beliefs, and how they will then show up have already been conditioned by the age of 7. And so if we then are able to support them in being able to work through anything that doesn't actually serve them, and then being able to build new values, new patterns, new beliefs, think of our self-belief and wanting our child to have that self-worth just so instilled and ingrained from such a young age that it then doesn't get tarnished as they move beyond. So it's being able to definitely support them through that time where they've had, potentially some things happen and they've already worked out who they are, and then being able to help them show up in that way and show up as who they are in the world.
All right. So, in other words, their personality, would you say?
Their personality, yes, is part of it. I think there's also, on top of the personality, are their beliefs and values.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, if we think of the 7 human needs, beliefs and values are definitely some of those sorts of critical ones in being able to identify who we are and how we present to the world.
Got it. So, those beliefs and values, they are generally formed before the age of 7.
They are formed early and they continue to form thereafter.
I see.
But a lot of things, if we start sort of getting into the psychology of it, a lot of limiting beliefs. For example, we will be able to work that back through a timeline, probably to that early childhood time period. On occasion, it might fall into the middle childhood, but typically speaking, you'd be able to work that back to the early childhood as the very first time something happened and they experienced something that then formed that internal belief system.
Okay. Okay. As an example, one of them is like their self-worth, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
That's so something that I hear a lot is like psychologists, they like to divide like age groups, like for, I don't know them specifically, like from 2 to 4 and then 4 to 5, and each one of them is fundamental for a certain amount of development.
Yep.
I wanted to ask you, how precise are those ages? For example, my son's now 5. Everything that happened when he was, like how precise is this division?
It's pretty well documented through the research. There has been so much research done to be able to identify how much of a slight movement to those age brackets there could be. And throughout all of the many, 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 many people that they've researched, they've really been able to define some of these. And in my experience, they are pretty close. It really does align. There might be 6 months, 12 months in it, but they're pretty close to spot on. These researchers have done some fantastic work in being able to identify those age brackets as part of that development journey.
That's amazing. It's so precise. Like 6 months. That's very precise. I think like I saw somewhere like different from a lot of animals, humans when they're born, like their evolutions is not done. They still need to. They have a long time that they need to grow and evolve. Like some animals, when they're
Yeah.
born, they're already there. You know that they're done. They don't need the parent caring for them anymore. But the humans are not like that at all.
No, exactly. And, if we think of children, they need their parents caring for them and need someone there to help them to have the food, help them to, have all of those nutritional needs that they have, the safety needs with where they live, and all of these sort of basic human needs. A child is completely reliant on someone else. As you say, in the animal kingdom, things are a little bit different with some animals. They can start to fend for themselves early on, but our children are so reliant on their caregivers and those parents. And that continues through till around that middle childhood. That's when they start to look out. And that's why it's such a critical time. And that's sort of where I focus, because that is where they do start to then look out and around at the world, and they're starting to experiment with independence a little bit more, and they're starting to want to do things, and they're starting, things are starting to change for them.
Mm-hmm.
They're wanting to be more of their own individual in the world. Yeah.
It's when they become more independent, and I heard that term before, like individualize. They want to individualization, something like that. It's like when they want to separate from their parents more, right? Yeah. Talking about the parents, Alicia. So when you're a kid, do you really see your parents as a god? Like, because they're entire world, so they're kind of like God, right?
Look, one of the main protective factors for a child's resilience is actually that parent-child relationship. Yeah. There are a few protective factors, but the biggest one that really makes the biggest impact on their ability to be resilient and to develop that skill is that parent-child relationship. So there very much is a dependency on that parent. And even beyond the dependency, there's very much that connection. And so if the child has been able to develop that strength of connection with their parent and be able to have that really deep relationship, and they've got some, there might be mutual interests that they do together, whatever that could be. But having that deep connection with the parent is actually really helpful in being able to set the child up for future success. So yes, there very much is that dependency, and for some children that could come across in more of that authoritative sort of way. It could come across in varying different ways. And, part of that comes down to different parenting styles and the different approaches that parents take as well. But what is confirmed in the research is that parent-child relationship that is cultivated from such an early age, the more that can be cultivated and the more focus and development that they can be on that relationship, the better set up for resiliency and for that future success the child will actually be.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I read somewhere that kids who grow up without a dad have a higher, like way higher risk of going to like criminal activities, something like, I don't know how valid this study is. It's like something that you just see on Instagram. But I can see, like, kind of resonates a little bit for what you're saying, I think, because if you take one of those, like one of the parents of the equation, I wonder how bad can get down the line. Do we have a lot of studies on that?
Look, there is a lot of research that's been done as to the unique benefits that both parents will actually bring to the child's development. And the studies that having a lack of either one and the impact that will have, there is a lot of research that's been done into that, and conclusively across the board, no matter which way you're looking at it, all of it is saying that both parents are really offering different benefits to the child. And so having both is what yields that best result. Being able to look at the influence of a father, for example, they are really looking at being able to teach problem solving. They're looking at various different sort of skills and natural traits and abilities that these fathers will be able to develop in the children, and that's going to be very different to the mother's ability to be able to teach the children around caring and nurturing and various different sort of abilities there. So There are some natural strengths that do come into play, but what the research conclusively shows is that both parents bring a very unique strength, and that the complement of both is just the winner for success there.
Yeah, it makes sense because I mean, evolutionarily speaking, that's how we evolved as humans, right? To have two parents. So logically, they would have different things to offer. I know from experience, Alicia. I have a mom and dad, but uh, for reasons that doesn't matter, I grew up living more with my mom, right? And throughout my great part of my teenager years and even early adult years, I craved for like a male role, you know,
Role
male
model.
role model, exactly. But I never even was conscious about it. You know, I was like, oh, this guy, like this martial artist, is amazing. I need to be more like him. You know, when I think I would not be trying to cope or copy those other like people that inspired me if I had more time with my dad while growing up. Like today, I kind of think that makes sense. Yeah, and yeah, it makes sense, right?
Like it does make
Yeah.
sense. And what the research does show is that fathers, they, by having that active involved father in a child's life, they will actually be able to develop stronger cognitive and motor skills.
Mm.
They will be able to have better physical and mental health. There's better problem solvers and more confident, curious, and empathetic. The research on it shows that that involvement will actually support further developing those skills.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I'm glad that I'm learning that.
So your experiences are definitely backed by the research there, Bru.
Yeah, yeah. How how old is those research? How far back do we like understand the effects of not having a parent or not having both parents? Like when we start understanding that.
That's a really great question. I have been looking at research for many, many years, and I'm yet to find the end of the rabbit hole of all those different studies. So I'm sure that there is an end to the research studies that I've been reading, but I'm yet to find that
Okay.
after years of just reading study after study after study. So there's a very vast amount of research that has been done over a long time, like decades. Yeah, it's been going for decades upon decades.
Decades upon decades. Okay. Um, Freud is Freud considered the father of psychology? He's the one who started it all. I'm really don't know anything about it, so I'm sorry.
So I think when we start working into that psychology world, it
Mm,
psychologists do tend to fall into a few different buckets. Some will believe that Freud is the father of psychology. Some will have a disagreement to that. Like everything in the world, there are differing views and can be controversial. um, but typically people will think to either Freud or Jung as some of those sort of early fundamental learnings that people will go back to.
okay.
So Carl Jung being the other one.
Where from which era are they from? Like which year? Do you know?
Oh, I don't know off the top of my head. No.
Let me look it up 1 second. Freud age. Okay, okay. So he's from 1856. So he was born in the 1856, and then Carl Jung.
Hmm.
Let's see. It's from 1875. Okay, so it kind of there was an over
Similar.
similar. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's not that old. It's like, okay. I heard that the brain is not fully understood yet. It's like it's an area of study that there's so many discoveries to be made to confirm this.
The brain is one of those amazing things that we have as humans that we will always be learning something more and new about how it works and the power of what it can do. There is always new research coming out, and it's just fascinating watching it all play through.
Mm-hmm. Did you see the recently Neuralink? They're starting to install chips into people's brain, and there's this guy who lost completely his mobility, and he started like moving his mouse cursor with his brain.
Wow, I hadn't seen that one. I knew that the research was starting to, play in around some of that sort of neural chip and that neural sort of implant world, but I hadn't actually seen that particular study.
Yeah, it's
Interesting.
it's really interesting. It's on YouTube. I think for many years they started like doing this test on chimps first, and they were like
Mhm.
just train the chimps to play like video games with their chip, the implanted chips. But now like they made such a crazy amount of progress that they're doing human tests. And I think it's amazing, but a little bit scary because imagine like in 10, 20 years from now, like right now they are promoting this ship just for people with disability. But I'm sure if they invent a new device that you just put over your ear, like a headphone or something, like everyone will be using this. It's gonna be so creepy.
I think not having it implanted into the brain will be far less scary as well. The brain is just so the slightest little wrong move, and things are going to just become in a world of pain there. So I love the idea of having it over the ears instead.
Yeah, me too. I'm not going through any surgery to implant stuff on my brain.
Too risky.
Alicia, since we're talking about technology and brains, I wanted to ask you how detrimental is technology for a kid's brain? For example, I hear a lot about those iPad kids growing up that they develop ADHD. I don't know how real is that. Like, so I ask you, like, what do you think about it?
The research on this topic is it can't be denied. What it is already starting to show, and obviously we've only got recent years, and recent in air quotes there, but we've only got this last little bit of time where we're starting to be really researching into the impact of the volume of technology and the the fact that people don't disconnect anymore. We've always got that phone in the hand. The computer is just constantly with us. Things are just constantly, those notifications are popping up. The information is always there. And what is conclusive in all of that research is that the negative impact that this is having on children is just can't be denied. They are not learning to self-soothe, which is then affecting their resiliency. They're not learning to be able to handle challenging emotions because they instead are looking to distractions. Instead of actually dealing with something in the moment, they'll look to just start scrolling on the social media, or they'll look to go and watch a video or something. And so there's this constant distraction approach instead of actually dealing with and processing emotions that they might be experiencing. There are so many things that are coming through in this research as negative outcomes and negative effects that these iPads and this technology are having on our children. What it is showing, and there's been some recent work done around the fact that we've actually lost the ability to be bored, in essence. We as our brains, going back to the brain conversation we were having, our brains actually need that simple activity time to be able to spark some of that creative thinking, to be able to, handle, processing everything, and to let these things percolate and to be able to come up with those new innovations. If we think about it, I'm sure, you, myself, and everyone who's listening, we can think of at least one time in our life where we've had the best idea while we've brushed our teeth or had a shower. Doing these simple activities, we've come up with this fantastic idea. That is because those simple activities are so crucial. And yet we are getting less and less and less time performing these simple activities. And the negative impact that this is having on the brain is why we're then seeing all of these other challenging issues pop up. So, by not having that ability to regulate our emotions, not having that ability to soothe, to self-soothe properly, not having all of these sorts of fundamentals is then impacting their resilience, which is then in turn, if we think of that snowball again, it's then in turn impacting the mental health more broadly, which is then why we're seeing such a significant increase in anxiety and depression levels in children. In the last 15 years in Australia, these have doubled. The rates of anxiety and depression in kids have doubled. That is terrifying. And it's just simply that there is more and more technology that these learnings that they need are not being, that they're not learning how to do these things. And so then as they start reaching those teenage years, and then as they start reaching the adult years where things are more challenging, they're experiencing harder and harder problems in life, and they don't have the ability to handle the smaller problems as these hurdles get bigger for them to be jumping. They don't have that ability to jump them. They're still only able to jump the little hurdle at the start. So this is where, a lot of the work that I do around those 3 pillars all circles back again, is that these are these fundamentals that we need to be bringing back to our kids so that they can learn how to handle balancing the pressures of them in life, as well as how that interplays with the technological age that they're living in, because that's obviously even different to how you and I grew up with technology. It is evolving so quickly, and these kids they've got devices in their hand from before they're even 12 months old. And so they've already learnt this inability to self-soothe from such an early age because they look to a device when they're wanting to cry. A device is there to help support them, but that's actually teaching them to distract. They never actually learn to self-soothe. They never learn some of these things, which then, we hear about healthy coping strategies and, relaxation and mindfulness and all of these sorts of things. As adults, we hear about these quite frequently, but these all come back to those same fundamentals again, in that they need to be able to learn these so that they can then handle living in the world with technology, with the challenges, and with everything that's at play.
Interesting. Okay, but the thing is, I would imagine if the parents themselves don't set a good example or don't have limits around using the technology, how would they be able to teach their kids or set limits to the kids? Because what I like when you're talking about the kids, but you also talk about the adults. We also don't disconnect that often. So it's like a global epidemic, it's everywhere. It's like not only the kids, and it's affecting everyone.
It very much is. Role modeling is one of the biggest things that the children will learn through, be it direct or indirect, because obviously there's some role modeling where they're just constantly watching the parents and they're constantly picking up things, whether we like it or not. They always pick up something. And then there's obviously that more conscious role modeling where we're trying to teach in a moment and trying to sort of teach through practice. But role modeling is critical, and that is the biggest way that children are learning. So as parents, yes, it is definitely something that we can all do better with as well.
Yeah, my mom used to say, "You need to do what I say, not what I do." But no, I think that's not how it
Yeah.
works. You end up doing what your parents do, right? Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
There's in my book, there's actually a few different, exercises and practical tools and things that people can do. And one of the things that I suggest, it's an optional one. There are two different activities, but the optional one that I would love to know the stats as to how many people actually do this is to try and go without technology as a family. And so we think about the
Ooh.
smartphones, we think about the TV, we think about the computer. Like, there is so much technology in our life that there is actually withdrawal symptoms that then pop up if we try to go without.
Yeah. Oh man, that sounds hard. Like,
Yeah.
I have a friend. He also faces the same problem, right? He cannot disconnect. He's always like with ghost syndrome, like the ghost vibration syndrome in his pockets, like, and he gave me this recommendation, Bruno. Whenever you go to the bakery, whenever you just go for a quick run outside, try not to take your phone at least once per week.
Yes.
And just by not having it, it already gives you this space, this mental space that you need. And I tried once, and it felt great. Like, but it took a long time, and it was very hard to convince myself to do it, which is crazy. It's like a symptom of addiction, basically. Which
It's exactly that.
and if you're already having so much trouble as an adult, imagine the kids that they pick up stuff so quickly. Damn. Oof.
Yep.
Yeah, Alicia. So I wanted to ask you. You mentioned a couple of times about self-soothing. Soothing. So could you give us like examples of self-soothing?
Yeah, sure. So if we think of a young child who is trying, they've experienced something that doesn't work for them, whatever that might be, but they've experienced something that they are perceiving to be negative in their environment, and they start crying. It's self-soothing is that ability to then be able to work through what is being experienced and to be able to bring that sense of safety, that sense of safety back to yourself. So it's really being able to work through what the emotion is. And there is very much power even in just simply naming the emotion that is being experienced, just as an aside. There's bringing it back to, what is that emotion? How are you then working through what that means and then being able to let it go at its very core fundamentals. And there are many different approaches that we can take to doing this. Obviously there's so many different coping strategies and some healthy, some less so. But there are a range of different coping strategies that people will use out there. And it's being able to draw on those coping strategies to help go through that motion of processing these feelings and being able to work through to letting it go.
Oh, I see. Okay, and one of them would be like naming the feeling, so you recognize it, you feel it, and then you let it go.
Yeah, exactly. One of those tips is definitely, pause to recognize that there is a feeling there. Name what that feeling is, and then being able to work out what that feeling is telling you, and then let it go.
That's so interesting. So is this considered emotional intelligence?
It's around emotional regulation. Yeah, and obviously as part of that emotional regulation, there is that broader emotional intelligence.
I see. Okay. That's so interesting. I had a guest on the show the other day, Simon, and Simon, I think he went through a very bad breakup, And he told me that the way he dealt with it, with the breakup, was through a very similar process, if not the same. Stop, feel your feelings, try to name it, and then let it go. And he also mentioned a lot about writing his feelings. So, can you?
And journaling
Yeah.
is very much a key thing to being able to work through the feelings. You know, as we get older, um, journaling is a great tool to lean into because you can actually work through those same steps. And by just writing it down, that in and of itself is actually a release process. So you write down what it is that you're experiencing, how that's making you feel, what is that sort of, what do you perceive that to mean for you? And by going through those steps and writing it all out, it then actually helps you to let it go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How? Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You're basically helping your brain to make sense of what is happening, right?
It's exactly it. It's very much helping the brain to understand, to process, and to make sense of what's being experienced. Um, Obviously, we all have different lenses that we view the world, but it is helping the brain to work through that particular situation in the way that it's being perceived.
Yeah. Is that the same process as talk therapy? Because when you're doing therapy, you're basically talking about your problem. So I assume it's a very similar process for the brain, right?
Um, Look, there is some similarities for sure. I think talk therapy has some value in being able to help the brain work through and understand, what it is experiencing and what it is that's what it's caught on, really, um, and being able to get to that at deeper and deeper levels. Um, because it initially we might think it means something in particular, but as we keep working that through, what we then actually learn is that there is more hidden underneath things. And so, that's where some of these journalings and the self-talk therapies are really great because you can just keep working through to understand the what does this mean for me.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's beautiful. I still don't understand how they don't teach that in school. You know,
Mm.
it's like I don't get. It's like so fundamental for being a human to understand yourself, your emotions, and journaling and let them go. It's like essential, and it's not something that it's taught. Not like either like either you have a very good parent who went through some trauma and end up learning this. It's really like I don't know. I don't want to call it lost knowledge, but at least the way I grew up, it was not anywhere to be seen. So I'm glad you're doing what you do, Alicia.
Thanks, Brew. It's exactly like what you said. This is, so why I am so passionate about what I do is that these, unless as adults we have gone through something and we've self-taught, these are not learnings that we're picking up. And so, yes, there are children who are getting those, really great skills being handed down. But wouldn't it be amazing if, as adults, we didn't have to begin the learnings there and that we could actually have already learned that when we were kids? Imagine just how much more we would have been able to accomplish and therefore what that positive impact would have been to society. So I can just see the big ripple effects of this work, and that's why I'm just so passionate about what it is that we can be doing here.
Yeah, I mean, I think if everyone knew that and got that message, the world would be like, I don't want to say utopia, but way closer to that, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about your book. So you wrote a book. How cool is
I
that?
did write a book. Yes, it's wonderful. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, the book is all about it's a book for parents, and it's really around, I guess it's unveiling a bit of a roadmap for parents on how they can transform that landscape of the lifestyle that the child is actually leading. So being able to look at how can they bring more of that resiliency? How can they bring more authenticity? How can they bring more of that entrepreneurial spirit into their child's life so that they can help to start develop these skills in their kids? It's a bit of a roadmap for parents on how to do that with some practical tips and exercises and like that, go without technology one that's in here.
Oh yeah, we need
Yeah.
we need that one.
That's a challenge for people. It's mission impossible. Will you choose to accept this or not?
So you mentioned about those three pillars: so resilience, entrepreneurship, and authenticity.
Yes.
So would you say that basically all the tips and techniques that are involved in a good childhood development fits in one of those three?
Yes, is the
Yes.
short answer. I think we can sum up all of these fundamental things that we want as adults to have learned. We can actually break it all back to some of these real critical skills that will fall into one of these three pillars. So that might be that falls into resilience, which also, obviously, to be resilient, you need that emotional regulation. So there are many layers that come under resilience, authenticity, and entrepreneurial spirit. There's so much deep work that we do in each of those three pillars.
Could you give us a little bit like some examples for each one? I think we already cover a couple, but could you like categorize where they belong?
Yeah, of course. So for resilience, we've covered, emotional regulation as an example and coping strategies and various things there. For authenticity, it's being able to cultivate that self-trust. So being able to recognize and honor all of those feelings, be it good and bad, and being able to then bring that self-trust, that self-awareness to being able to show up in the world in a way that is aligned with themselves and their values. And that's probably one of the really challenging things for people to develop. And then we've got entrepreneurial spirit, which is that growth mindset. So, how are we perceiving failure? How are we looking to learn things? Do we believe so? A growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. The fixed mindset is that you can't actually learn more. You can't develop your skills further. I'm just bad at maths, full stop. Whereas a growth mindset for that same sentence of I'm bad at maths, a growth mindset would instead be looking at I'm still learning how to do maths. The future possibilities versus I just can't, closed off, fixed mindset. So being able to even just simply reframe how things are perceived. Entrepreneurial spirit and a lot of the work we do there is around mindset and being able to bring that mindset of growth, of perceiving failure as a learning opportunity, and just the next step towards that future success and towards that future innovation. Being able to work through problems in a effective way, being able to have that creativity. So yes, for both of those, there's so many different things as well.
Man, I love that you mentioned about the failure part, the failure thing, because I know so many people like they just have this limited mindset. No, why should I learn how to play the saxophone? I suck. I will never be good. Like, yeah, of course, that's how you start anything. First, you're horrible at it, but then you get better. And that's something that I learned recently. And since then, like, completely changed my life. For example, I wanted to learn how to play the guitar, and everyone's like, yeah, but it's hard, it's going to take forever. And that was my mindset as well for many, many years. Like, I'm never going to do it. It's like just really cool people who have the time and practice a lot and are very skilled and were born skilled can do that. No, that's true. And like a friend told me, like, it doesn't matter if you buy a guitar today, you're a guitarist, you're a guitar player. You're a guitar player. You're just a very bad one, but you are one. And the only way to improve is starting and like started being bad at it. And I think I'm repeating myself. You understand what I say, but it's like a mindset, like you said, and it needs to be learned. It's not automatically.
Yeah, exactly. There's a quote that I love, and I'm not going to get it 100%, but it's along the lines of, we need to be patient while we're becoming someone new and while we're learning these new things. It is a journey, and that's very much what we need to remember, is that we're not going to be in instant, be able to play the guitar instantly, to use your example there. And if we think of all of these famous guitar players, none of them learned to play it overnight either. Again, for every single person who's played the guitar, it has been a journey of development. For some, there might be more of a natural ability and they might be starting from a different level. But for them to get to the next level, there is still development. There is still a journey for every single person. And this is what we need to remember, is that no matter who it is that we're looking at, that in these famous people that are out there, they've all had that same journey. It's just that we didn't see that journey before they became famous.
Yeah, and we assume that they were born that way, which is insane. No one's born like being the most skilled at anything in life. At least that's how I perceive reality. Some people they
These are
believe.
things that we cultivate.
Yeah, yeah. Some people believe in reincarnation, and he was Mozart in his previous life. I don't believe in that. Yeah, yeah. It's something that you learn, and the instant gratification part that you mentioned. Like in today's world, everything is about instant gratification. Everything. Like
Mm.
with we talked a little bit about technology. Like on Tinder, you just swipe right, swipe left. You have like instant relationships, instant noodles, instant everything. That's
Fast food, like yeah.
yeah, and that's not how our brain, as far as I understand, evolves and process things. I was talking to my therapy a long time ago, and she mentioned like Bruno, and I was really bad at the time. I went through a breakup at the time, and it was like I want to get better now. I want to feel good again, like right now. And she was like, Bruno, chill. Like that's not how it works. Imagine, and then she gave me this example. Imagine you want to learn something new. You go to university, and the university lasts like 4 years, something like that. Imagine like the work we're doing here, like going through university. You're not getting your degree today. And I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. And then after I understood it, like I was so impatient, to be honest, but it lowered my
Yep.
expectations a lot. Yeah.
And yes, and if we think of that analogy of going through university as a learning curve, what you knew at the start versus what you knew at the end. But even when you finish university, think of any graduate coming out of university going into the workplace, and then where they are, 10 years later, or even 4 years later, the 4-year degree and then 4 years in the workplace thereafter. That there's already even more learning. So we are constantly learning and evolving, and it's a never ending journey of life. And I think this is where we need to really bring that personal and professional continued development as, just real sort of key priorities and values for us, by continually looking at it. Just again, this just continues to foster that growth mindset and that perception of that learning journey as a positive.
Mm-hmm. So it's really a lifelong learning journey, in your opinion?
I very much see it as a lifelong learning journey.
Whew, okay. But it starts in the childhood, right? So I guess if you have a childhood coach, it really helps a lot.
It gets you so far further ahead than what you would be otherwise. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
if we think of kids learning something new physically, you put a kid up on a surfboard or on a snowboard, and they can pick that up so much faster than an adult because they're very adaptable and they're open to looking at all of these new learnings and looking at these things. Same thing goes for their learnings. Being able to teach them how to foster this mindset. If they are learning that early, it's obviously going to be so much easier for them than if they've had 30 years of a particular way of approaching life and then they're wanting to change that. So it's very different, and it's so much more supportive if we can actually bring these learnings earlier into life. And I know I've looked at many kids. I've just started learning to snowboard a few years ago, and I've looked at many kids while I've been learning to snowboard going, I wish I was as good as you. You're 5 and you're just sailing down that mountain. I wish I was that great. So, kids, they pick things up so much faster than we can as adults.
For sure. And that's another thing, like comparison. When you compare yourself to other people, like you're gonna fail. Like you're gonna get depression, anxiety. You need to compare yourself with yourself. How you look like, how you snowboarded 1 year ago, 2 years ago. That's the only comparison that matters. Because you're
Exactly.
Yeah, right?
There's a quote that I love. The only person that you should compare yourself to is who you were yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Is the only comparison we should be making. Are we showing up better today than what we were?
Yeah, because
have we learned something new?
Sorry, go ahead, Alicia.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, because you have your own journey. You went through your own problems. You have your own struggles. How are you going to compare with someone else who, for example, were born in the Alps with parents who were like teachers of snowboard professionals? I don't know. Like there's no comparison. You need to lay your own path and follow your own journey. Like there's no sense in comparing yourself to others. But then again, that's something you need to learn, because automatically it seems that we grew up trying to compare ourselves to everyone.
That is how we've all grown up, unless you've had a child development coach teach you the only person you should compare yourself to is the person you were yesterday. And that becomes how you then grow up.
Beautiful. I learned that doing martial arts. I remember I was doing martial arts for a long time, and my sensei at the time was like, Bruno, his quote was, you today better than you yesterday better. Something like that, because it was Japanese. It was like, yeah, every day I need to be like the better version of myself. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, there's so many things that as parents we can help these kids in learning these sort of areas. As that 5-year-old's out there learning to snowboard, and being able to just get them to simply compare to themselves previously. I know on my journey, I've looked at these 5-year-olds with a little bit of envy at times, I must admit. But I keep comparing myself to, how was I last season? Am I doing something better this season to what I was able to do? Is there a new skill that I've learned now that I couldn't do 2 weeks ago, or whatever that might be? So just continually looking back and reflecting at that journey is a real big motivator as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful, and I'm glad you're like spreading this message with your coaching and your book. That's really good. So Alicia, I wanted to ask you. Once I heard that grown-ups, adults, they're nothing more than grown-up babies, and whenever that because when you're a kid, you see them, especially your parents, as people who know everything and they have everything figured out. And as you grow up, as we all know, that's not the case. Are we really just grown-up babies who... Is the same true?
I'm not necessarily sure I would put it that way, but the way I would perceive it is that it is that lifelong journey. Okay. There is never an end to what we are learning. And so if we think of kids, we think of them as continually learning something new. They're learning to walk, they're learning to talk, they're learning to use a spoon and the cutlery and the fork. You know, as adults, we're learning different things. By now, we've sort of learned how to walk and talk and use a fork. And so now we're learning different things in the world, but it doesn't change the fact that we are continually learning and continually evolving. And so I guess if we were to compare, you know, I guess we're still learning, and that's what babies do, I guess. But I very much just see it as it all comes back to that lifelong learning.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. I agree. Yeah. Wow. So I'm not a parent myself, but I wish to be one day. I would love to have a kid one day. And something that I hear a lot is that you're never prepared for it. You're never prepared for parenthood. How true is that?
So I have two stepsons. I
Yeah.
don't have children of my own,
Okay.
but I very much have heard the same thing. And in my experience with many different friends and the parents that I've supported and coached through these sorts of journeys, it is very much the feeling that they are never prepared. But this comes back to that self-trust with that authenticity pillar that I teach as well. You know, if we were to trust ourselves as parents and to trust that what we're doing is actually right and helpful, and it's, you know, nurturing and is doing things that we want it to do, and bringing that self-trust to what it is that we're doing as parents as well.
All right. So self-trust. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I also heard it's a very humbling experience. I don't know. I don't know. Have you seen this guy? What was his name? The guy from Hangover, the movie, Bradley Cooper. He's like Hollywood star, right? He recently had a daughter, and for whatever reason, he just came out in the news saying that he doesn't understand parenthood. I'm paraphrasing him, right? He said he doesn't understand parenthood. Why everyone is like it so much? Like he said it. I kind of don't love my kid. Like, why would people say would they die for them? Like, I just caring for this creature right now, and I have my own. Like he was so cold about it. I don't know. I think
I
yeah,
yeah.
it's so weird, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen any of that info from Bradley Cooper. What I can say though is that the neuroscience actually says otherwise. The neuroscience actually says that at the birth of the first child, the man's brain actually increases and it grows more brain cells. And
Really?
for the female, there's a natural sort of shift biochemically as well. So the parents actually, they physically change with the birth of their child as well. So that's what the neuroscience is showing us anyway, is that there is a change in the parents. So I don't know about Bradley Cooper, but science says that we get this support that we need as parents when things happen.
I see. So just to confirm, so just to not spread misinformation, I'm gonna read what he said. He said that the first 8 months, he was like, I didn't even know if I loved that kid. That's it. So it's kind of something weird to say in public. But so what exactly changed on the man's brain when you have the kid?
So it actually increases and it grows more brain cells.
More brain cells.
Hmm.
Not on Bradley Cooper.
It will have happened. It's just whether he's choosing to embrace that or not.
All right. Okay, so in the man's brain, more brain cells grow. And in the woman's brain, what happens exactly?
So the neuroscience is showing that there is a shift in the women's brain as well to be able to bring that nurturing, that care, that protection, that that it's all, again, coming back to where there is this biochemical, well, I mean, it's a biochemical, but there's this change in the body and in the brain in how both parents are actually showing up and how they can be there to support the kid. If we think of a newborn, there does need to be a change in the parents' neuroscience and their makeup there to be able to handle not having sleep for a little while there, and to be able to handle the fun of the terrible twos. Is that something that you have in Germany as well? There's something called the terrible twos, where the kid turns 2 years of age, and there's there's very much a pop psychology kind of perception that they then start learning the word no and actively use it during the during the time that they're 2 years old. They call it the terrible twos. But you need to have a change in your body, your brain, and how you can actually show up in order to be prepared for these journeys ahead.
Yeah. I guess. I mean, there's no choice. You have a kid now. You need to adapt. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I assume that going through this process for millions of, not millions, thousands of years, we humans actually, yeah, like things change, right? We evolve to adapt. We adapt, right? That's so interesting. Okay. So our brains change when you have kids. I heard that what was it again? Um, there's a thing called motherly protect. I don't remember how it's called, but it was along those lines that the brain changes and the mom gets extremely overprotected, protective over the child, and in some
Yep.
cases can even get aggressive, right?
Well, if we think of mum's strength as well, if the child is in danger, there is a whole different level of strength that mum just naturally has to being able to protect and support that kid. We've all seen various different videos or stories or something along the way of a mum doing something incredible to be
Yeah.
able to protect the kid from harm. Um, you know, lifting something that they shouldn't be able to normally lift, or whatever that might be.
Yeah, I heard stories about it. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Mm.
Another thing that I also heard that becoming a parent, it's you can only do that if you're really not selfish. I mean, everyone I think can learn how to be a parent, but I mentioned about being like the humbling process. When what I meant by that's like you need to let go of your selfishness. If you, for example, if you live alone, you have a certain lifestyle. But then if you include a partner into your house, you start sharing a flat, like you need to let go of some things. You cannot be 100% selfish because now there's another person involved. You cannot like just do the dishes whenever you want to, or tidy up the house whenever you want to, because there's more people like in this living situation. So you need to be a little bit less selfish. And then, for example, if you include a cat into the situation, again, you have again less time for yourself and for your selfish needs. Now you need to take some time of your day to feed the cat, to clean the cat's poop, right? So again, you have there's no space for selfishness. I mean, you need to let it go a little bit. And from what I heard, like having a kid is the ultimate test. You really need to learn how to let go of your selfishness. Like if the kid is hungry, like you need to, especially the mom, you need to have time for the kid. If the kid needs a new diaper, you need to stop doing whatever you're doing to change the diaper. So if you're watching TV and like you don't have time for it, you need to take care of the kids. So yeah, that's something that I'm also slowly learning to let go of my bad habits in order to have more time for the girlfriend, for the cat. I don't know how it's gonna be with kids, but yeah, I can see how it's evolving.
And I think there is an element there where we need to have that self-awareness of how we are showing up in that environment as there are more people. The thing that I would add to our conversation, though, is that self-care still needs to be so fundamental. And that is where a lot of people think when those sorts of changes happen, that self-care becomes lower on the priority scale. That's not it at all. Self-care is still such an important thing for every single person. And that's how we can then show up as our better selves, by having that time for self-care.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's amazing. I'm glad you added that self care. Sleeping is also self care, right?
It is.
If you can. Um,
Eating nutritious food,
getting.
having that activity. These are all things that we probably do without being so conscious of them, but they're all activities towards self-care.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Beautiful. So sleeping well, nutritious food, having some type of physical activity. What else would you recommend?
So I think it comes back to, what we were talking about before, is with that device time as well, making sure
Device
we
time.
have some simple activities as well as some the device time that we all have to have, whether it be working on the computer or schoolwork on the computer, whatever it is. Make sure we also build in those simple activity times. And that could be doing a puzzle. It could be doing some sport. There are various different ways to have that simple activity sort of time frame, but build that in to protect our brains. That's what the neuroscience is showing, is that we're actually doing damage to our brains because we haven't got these times. And that's where we're seeing some of these mental health challenges and vulnerabilities crop up later. Yeah, so I think there's many different ways that we can bring that self-care to our world. But as parents, it's so important that we demonstrate self-care and that we role model this, so that way our kids are also learning how to have these sort of important activities, be it doing some relaxation for yoga or a mindfulness meditation or whatever it might be, or making sure that we have those nutritious meals in our week, and making sure that we have all of these sorts of different parts in our life. And by role modeling that as parents, we're then actually teaching indirectly, this is what we're then role modeling and teaching our kids. And that's then how they learn to grow up and create the lifestyle that they have. So hence the book being all about changing the lifestyle that your kid has.
Well, Alicia, the way I see it, you're a childhood development coach, but the primary amount of work needs to be done on the parents, right? If if they need to become the role model.
The coaching sessions are definitely with both. We spend time every week with both the kid and the parent. But yeah, and it all comes back again to, we're never finished learning. There are many parents that I've worked with that they're still learning new things. Yeah.
So how do you organize yourself? So you meet the kids and the parents together once per week?
Not together.
Not,
So
oh,
yeah, so with my coaching sessions, I will meet with the kid, and we do an hour coaching session, well, approximately an hour. And then I meet with the parents for approximately an hour as well, for being able to help them learn how they can support the child in the home environment as well. Obviously, like what you and I have discussed, many of the learnings that this kid is learning through that 12-week coaching program, many of the learnings that they have are also things as parents that we can be starting to implement and bringing into our own life. But really the focus of that session is, how can as a collective group of adults, the parents and me in the coaching position there, as a collective group of adults, how can we instill and support the kid to be able to practice these learnings, to be able to have the ability to, really embed and to ground and to really get that deep understanding of what it is that they've been learning that week. So there is that teaching session with the kid and that coaching session with the kid. And then there's that one with the parent on how can they, in the household and in their family, be able to support and further some of those learnings.
I see. Wow. Would you say that therapy is complementary to this type of program, or it varies case by case, or
It's all case by case as to what the needs are. That's part of where I love to do the free discovery session initially with the parent to be able to understand, what are those sorts of challenges? What is it that is the front of mind with that particular parent and that child? Because then we can tailor the program to how that's going to suit them. But then also I can provide those recommendations of, I think that this additional piece here is going to be helpful, and or that particular thing there. So for some kids, there might be some value in having some additional, professional help from a psychologist. For some kids, it might be picking up some other particular activities or whatever that might be. So or in some situations, actually balancing and taking a step back from having such a full schedule and too many activities. So it's being able to work out what's going to be the best approach and support for that child and for those parents.
got
And
it.
it could be a whole range of things.
Got it. Makes sense. Okay. Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, I used to watch this show Super Nanny. I think you heard about it, right? I think it's famous worldwide. And and I always felt like Super Nanny was extremely strict, but then because first they present her like, oh, super strict, and she would dress like a certain way, and then they represent the kid, and the kid I I say that in a joking way, was like a little demon, was just destroying the whole house. Like, yeah, go Super Nanny, teach this kid. Like, and at the beginning was like really antagonizing the kid, right? And cheering for Super Nanny. So I had like this duality mentality, one against the other. But as the episode progressed, I would just see like the kid calming down and saying "I love you, mom" again back to the mom, and Super Nanny also being super warm, and like I specifically remember this episode. This kid was like this little demon because the mom would always just pump sugar into his system the whole day, not thinking about it, right? She was just not conscious about it, like the effects of for whatever reason, which seems kind of weird, but whatever. And Super Nanny just like every kid, most kids are lovely if you know how to handle them, and like and she was very it was very interesting. She was like just asking the mom, have you ever considered not giving your kid like 2 liters of Nutella every night before bedtime so he can actually go to bed? And she was like, now that you mention, and like there that was the issue.
Yeah.
So I guess every kid's different, right? You can tell more than I can, but sometimes the issue can be super small, I guess.
Yeah. And that's it. Every kid is different. Every household and family is going to have a different way of approaching these sort of sessions, and how, the kid interacts with sugar, with the various different activities and things. And Everybody is different, and that's part of what makes the world so amazing. But it also means that's why we need to tailor everything so that we can actually look to what is it that's actually needed for that particular child. You know, your example is that maybe it is something really simple like sugar at a particular time of day and the impacts that that was having on them. And there are definitely some that are nice and simple like that. And then there are some that are more complex. But again, it's all still drilling down to what are those fundamental elements at play, and then being able to make those tweaks and changes.
I want to play devil's advocate for a second. Let's
Yeah.
let's assume that one of those changes are outside of your control, the parents' control. Let's say the problem is the school. They're just in a very bad environment at school. What recommendations would you give?
I again get curious with what is it about the school that is the problem? Is it the friendship group? Is it that they're not being taught in a way by, you know, the learning style for that particular teacher in that moment isn't actually aligning with them? Is it that they're struggling academically and being able to keep up with the work? And then again, drilling down onto that, if there is an element there where they're struggling to keep up with the work, is it because there's a misalignment with learning styles? Is it because there is something just fundamentally that is not yet diagnosed, be it dyslexia, be it, you know, whatever that might be? You know, just looking at all of the different elements, because something like all the problems at school, even that alone is huge in the scope of what it could be. And so it's then continually diving in and getting curious of what are the different pieces that are at play there until we can actually find where that root cause is.
So it might be that the problem is not even school. The
Might
kid,
not be.
yeah, the kid might just say it's school or don't like school or whatever, but might be something completely different. That's why it's so important to dig deeper. Okay.
And, you know, something that we are seeing as a result of COVID is an issue with school absence. So there's a lot of children who are actually experiencing a heightened level of anxiety about being at the school and in the physical realm of the school. So again, they might say it's the school, but it could actually be something fundamentally underneath that they actually need some professional support with.
I see. Yeah, that makes all the sense. Um, Me as a kid, I, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I hated school. What I liked was about socializing. That's what I loved.
Yep.
Talking to my friends. And as I grew up, I met other people similar to me. Like they also hated school, and informally talking, we reached the conclusion that the only benefit that schools have nowadays, I mean, not the only, but the biggest one, is the social aspect. Would you agree with that?
I I would agree that the schools definitely offer a valuable social aspect. I think there are many other facets that the schools definitely do provide value in. I think it also comes down to which particular school and the schooling curriculum that are being taught. You know, I have very much seen, you know, even just simply throughout Australia, the different curriculum that is available. You know, some schools use the International Baccalaureate sort of pathway. Some schools use the local curriculum, whatever that might be. But there are vast differences in what those are supporting the kids with as well. So I think there are definitely some schools that will provide them a lot more, but I do very much agree with the value that the schools have in being able to develop those interpersonal skills, to be able to develop those communication skills, to be able to develop all of these fundamentals through that social side of the schooling is very much a huge benefit of kids being able to have those connections there.
Yeah, 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 and it's like you mentioned, like when you're helping kids, vary kids from kids, and also every school is different, varies from school to school. Totally, yeah. I had a very good school, so I moved a lot as a kid, right? And for a while, I lived in France, and there was a particular school in France that that I loved. Like it was like the best school experience of my life, and that's because everyone like was a big class. I think we're like 25, and everyone in that class was friends with each other. They were all friends. We were like one big group of friends. They always trying to include each other instead of exclude or creating smaller groups. And I felt so welcome there. That I was like, now I want to learn. Now I'm happy here. You know, I feel that I belong. So I tied that to the social aspect. And I was like, yeah, now I have friends. And therefore, now I like the school. So I can see how nowadays kids growing up, not growing up, but during COVID, learning through screen, like you remove so much of that. Yeah.
Yeah. COVID, it really changed the approach to schooling. And for a lot of kids now, it has actually also changed how they will connect with each other. There's a lot more, they'll be online together talking, just on phone calls and or doing things together, but in a virtual space, because that's how they were for so long of their, real sort of formative years.
Yeah.
Um, so I think being able to support kids being comfortable in that school space and being able to be comfortable with those social interactions and being able to engage and build those relationships and build those connections with people, these are really valuable lessons that we can be teaching kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're helping.
Thank you. I think
Hmm?
I think the other thing that we can, drawing on the example that you were just sort of talking to there, where the social side at that school that you were at in France actually really helped to bring that motivation and that engagement. I think this is something as parents that we can also really look out for. Um, what is the one good thing about the maths class or about the language class or about whatever it is that the child might be a bit more resistant to? What's the one good thing that's in that particular scenario that they can then help to bring that motivation and that engagement to the situation by encouraging and reminding and focusing with that gratitude mindset again of how can they really focus on that as being a motivator for them to get through that situation?
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to ask, what technique would you suggest to the parents, or how to talk to the kids in case they close themselves? Me as a kid, I remember when I had a problem, I would just close myself. And I know I see other kids from other people, like they just don't talk about something. They don't want to open themselves up. How can you approach that? Like, if I was a parent right now, I would freak out. I would have no idea what to do.
So in my experience, the
Yeah.
reason that that's happening is that those emotions are being shut down.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And so this sort of circles back to what we were talking about before, and being able to recognize the emotion, be aware of it, name it. What is it actually teaching us? What's it trying to say? Why is it here? Being able to bring that awareness, and for some people it might be journaling, for some it might be having a discussion with somebody, for some it might be in more of a meditative style, where they're actually sort of sitting there and having a conversation with themselves, and it's sort of in that meditative scenario. But the shutdown, typically speaking, is because there's an emotion that's being resisted
Mm.
and distracting away from not wanting to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And kids nowadays have all got the iPad to help them in that scenario. That's there to distract them for them.
Oh man, Apple just announced just now. I think this year, last year, like a journaling app. So you're supposed to write about anything, journaling
Yeah.
basically. And I was like, yeah, that's cool, but why can't I do that on a like offline? Why do I need to do that digitally?
Yeah.
Oh, they just
If
announced. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, if that digital app is the gateway, though, towards building a really positive habit, embrace it.
So, okay.
I know that digital app, it will actually look at where you've been through the day and help with prompters. And so, if that's going to help start the process of that reflection, great. But I agree, there's nothing wrong with a good little pen and paper.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Pen and paper will actually help the brain move through things at a deeper level as well, because you've then got the physical motion of it.
And you cannot erase stuff and edit stuff that fast and easily, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, sorry.
I think you've just touched on a really good point there, though, is that the one thing with journaling, that just a tip for all of us, the one thing with journaling there is make sure that the kids aren't looking for perfection, and that they're just simply letting it flow. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be right. It doesn't have to be anything. It just is. And just let that happen. There's no right or wrong through that process. So don't let perfection be the challenge there. It doesn't have to look amazing on the page. It doesn't have to have all of the little pictures next to them. Just let it be.
Let it be. Perfect. Yeah. I watched this show Shark Tank, and they always say like perfection's the enemy of profit.
Yeah.
And since we talk about entrepreneurship for children, like I don't want to say profit, but maybe childhood development, right? Instead of trying to be perfect all the time, like just fail. I think it also comes back to the guitar thing, right? Like just you need to fail in order to get better. Yeah, yeah,
Failure is our first attempt at learning.
beautiful. While we were talking about schools, I remember there was this Venus project. Have you heard about the Venus project?
No, I haven't.
So there's this guy. I think he passed away already. If I'm not mistaken, the Venus project started in the 70s. So it was just like this urban architect who imagined the perfect city. And he goes into details how world would be way better with his city, his type of city, and so forth. But that's not the point that I wanted to talk about. Since we were talking about school earlier, he suggested like a completely new approach to school. He said that kids don't learn all the same way, and I would agree, and that the best way of learning is through playing and experiencing the world around you. I mean, a lot of people will learn reading a book, I'm sure, sitting in class, but accordingly to him, the most effective and best way for kids to learn is like going out and experiencing the world. So I think he gave this example. If you want to learn about biology and nature, like you would actually, the ideal scenario is you would take the kids outside, plant a little seed, and then come back every month to see how it's growing, and but really outside with the teacher, and the teacher would explain what's happening, like, and the kids would actually have planted the thing, and then they would go there and touch it again, And I think that it was like a basic example, and his most extreme example is like, if you want to teach the kids about the sea life, you actually put all the kids into a boat and cross the ocean. That was a little bit extreme, but
Yeah, I'd
yeah.
love to see the permission slips for that excursion. So,
But the initial part, the tree part, and like if you want to learn about light and reflection, you actually go outside and take a mirror and explain like refraction stuff and stuff. Like, I kind of resonate with that. I kind of agree. It's way more engaging, right?
and yes, exactly. Finding that motivator and what it is that's going to have someone engaged is really going to be the key for them being able to embrace the learning. You know, for some kids, they actually do really well at sitting in and reading and being able to take that in a written form is actually going to be really helpful. Typically speaking, I'll just put a little asterisk on that. Typically speaking, the written form coupled with some visual is actually better for the brain's comprehension. But there is that style of learning. There are definitely those ones where it's that bodily kinesthetic sort of learning where they will learn by doing, by touching, by feeling, by actually experiencing it themselves. There are so many different styles of learning. For some people, it's listening through someone actually talking them through that particular process. But there is a lot of benefit and value in definitely being able to have that experience where they're actually getting all of these learning styles. So have the full range, have that time in the classroom where you're actually reading something, have that time where you're then putting that into practice in the real world. So, I love the analogy that you used where you're learning, maybe it's about photosynthesis. And so you're actually looking at the plant itself and watching it grow and going through some of the discussions around what's actually happening. There's so many different things, obviously, that could be about. But being able to have those experiential learnings as well is just so valuable. And that's where I think I've seen varying different sort of levels of this at schools. And I think, yeah, there's some really fantastic schools out there that are really starting to embrace some of this. And then there are other schools who have different approaches. And because we have different people who learn in
Yeah.
different ways, there's obviously benefit for all of them. But personally, I love those ones where it is a bit of a mix of learning styles.
So do they have this in Australia, like mixing learning styles at schools?
There are. It's to a degree.
Okay.
um, you know, there are some schools where you actually do get a lot more of that experiential sort of learning included as part of things. But there is a varying sort of levels of how all of this will come to play. So I think for that utopian world that you were sort of referencing from that other gentleman, that I haven't seen anywhere, be it Australia or internationally. But there is definitely little bits of that starting to creep in throughout the world, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hope there's more because I definitely, but me personally, I don't learn like sitting in class reading books. That's not my
Yeah.
style. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Um, so Alicia, I wanted to ask you, what is for the future? Are you writing new books? Are you planning to expand your childhood development coaching practice? Any
Yeah.
plans?
So I currently offer it in a in-person and virtual scenario. Um, I am really looking forward to having some time, hopefully next year, to be able to sit down and start looking at the next book, to start looking at some online self-paced training for people to be able to tap into. That way, it doesn't matter what time zone, you can work based on your own time zones. But being able to have some of these additional resources. But I absolutely loved the process of writing my book. It was just so much fun and amazing journey. I am really excited to be able to get back and write a second book. To be confirmed as to when that will be. But there's definitely going to be a second book on the horizon for sure.
All right. Looking forward. So, can you remind people where they can find your current book and where they can find your work, how they can contact you?
Yeah, of course. So the best place to find all of the information is my website, which is saplingminds.com.au. So sapling, like a little tree. So think of it like a little tree growing, those little kids' minds. So saplingminds.com.au. There are links on there to the shop where you can buy the book. There's an ebook. There's also a physical copy of the book. There's also particulars around I do an intensive 3-day in-person workshop with people as well as my signature program. And there's some particulars around what that is. There's details on being able to access that free discovery session where we can obviously have a bit more of a chat about the personal circumstances and how some of that one-to-one coaching would work. And then you can also find the book on Amazon as well.
Perfect. We're going to leave the links on the description below. Thanks very much, Aliesha. So do you have any final remarks, anything that you'd like to say?
Look, I think if we've covered so many different things for today, I think if people are able to take even just one thing away from our conversation, that's going to make such an amazing positive ripple effect in the lives of the people around them. So I really hope that there's something that people can take away, if not even more than one thing. That would be great.
Oh, I'm sure they will. It was great. Thank you very much, Aliesha.
Thank you, Bru.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. If it's your first time watching, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to rank the show 5 stars. This will ensure that the podcast is recommended to even more people and allow me to keep doing what I love. Check out now the BruCast store, Explorer store filled with awesome goodies from hoodies to t-shirts to mugs. We've got you covered. Stay in style with BruCast. Embrace the shock. Set the trend. Buy now at brew-cast.com/store. I repeat, brew-cast.com/store. Links on the description below. BruCast is also on Instagram, X, and TikTok, where we upload shorts with the highlights of the show. So follow now, BruCast on Instagram, X, and TikTok. Links on the description below. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Aliesha. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right. How was it?